In the bustling streets of an American city, Daniela's journey begins with a glimmer of hope. Holding tightly onto an envelope that could change her life, she confronts Arturo, a man of wealth and power, who initially meets her with distrust. Through persistence, Daniela gains entry into Arturo's grand mansion, revealing crucial documents that she returned with only one request: to be treated as a daughter for a week. While Arturo's heart softens, his wife Lorena's suspicion and disdain towards Daniela grow, culminating in a heated confrontation. The discovery of a possible connection between Lorena and the lost documents threatens to shatter the fragile bond they've formed. Yet, through it all, Daniela's desire for family love remains steadfast. Will this week of familial warmth survive the storm of distrust, or will it crumble under the weight of suspicion? If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Under the blazing sun of a bustling American city, Daniela moved through the crowded streets, each step heavy with the relentless weight of her past and the fragile hope of a new beginning. The envelope she clutched tightly against her chest seemed to burn her hands, a symbol of the desperation and dreams she had carried through the harsh years of her young life. At just 20 years old, Daniela had endured more pain and struggle than most could imagine, her days a brutal battle for survival, her nights haunted by the cold indifference of the world. But today, something was different. Today, she held in her hands a chance, perhaps her only chance, to change her fate. As she approached the towering gates of Arturo's mansion, her heart pounded violently in her chest, each beat a mix of fear and fierce determination. The mansion loomed before her, an imposing fortress of wealth and power that seemed worlds away from her existence. Daniela hesitated for a moment at the massive front door, gathering every ounce of courage she had left, and then, with a trembling hand, she rang the bell. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a tall, stern-faced woman whose icy glare could pierce through the bravest of souls. The housekeeper's eyes swept over Daniela, her lips curling into a sneer of disdain. "What do you want?" The housekeeper's voice was sharp, cutting through the air with cold indifference. It was clear that Daniela's presence was not just unexpected, it was unwelcome, an intrusion into a world where she did not belong. But Daniela stood her ground, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "I need to speak to Mr. Arturo. I have something important, documents that he needs to see," Daniela said, her words firm and unwavering. The housekeeper let out a harsh, mocking laugh, her eyes narrowing with contempt. "Mr. Arturo does not entertain beggars. If you're here for money, you better find a job," she spat out, her hand already moving to shut the door in Daniela's face. But Daniela was quicker. She thrust her foot into the gap, refusing to let the door close on her last shred of hope. "I'm not leaving until I give him these documents. They're crucial," she insisted, her voice rising with urgency and determination. The housekeeper hesitated, her hand faltering as she caught a glimpse of something unyielding in Daniela's gaze. With a huff of irritation, the housekeeper turned away, leaving the door ajar as she disappeared into the depths of the mansion. Daniela was left standing on the threshold, her heart racing as she fought to keep her composure. The minutes ticked by slowly, each one amplifying her anxiety, until finally, a tall, imposing figure emerged from the shadows. The man who owned this grand estate, a figure of immense power and influence, now stood before her, his expression a mask of irritation and suspicion. His eyes bore into Daniela with a mix of disdain and curiosity, as if trying to decipher the intentions of this young woman who dared to disturb his peace. "What is this all about?" Arturo demanded, his voice laced with impatience. Daniela could feel his gaze probing her, searching for any sign of deceit. "I found your documents," Daniela replied, holding out the envelope with a trembling hand. Arturo took it, his eyes narrowing as he quickly scanned the contents. For a moment, his stern demeanor faltered, replaced by a flicker of shock as he recognized what was inside. "Where did you get these?" Arturo's voice was edged with suspicion, his eyes narrowing as he tried to unravel the mystery. "It doesn't matter where I found them," Daniela responded, forcing herself to stay calm despite the tension in the air. "What matters is that I brought them to you." Arturo's eyes hardened once more, his skepticism returning in full force. "These documents shouldn't be in the hands of someone like you. You're lying. If you're after money, you're wasting your time." "I have no patience for this nonsense," he said, stepping back as if to close the door once more. But Daniela's voice cut through the air, sharp and resolute. "I'm not leaving until you take your documents," she declared, her voice trembling with the intensity of her conviction. "You need them, and I'm here to make sure you get them." Arturo paused, his hand still hovering over the door. He stared at Daniela for what felt like an eternity, as if weighing the truth in her words, the sincerity in her eyes. Finally, with a begrudging sigh, he opened the door wider. "Fine," he muttered, his voice grudgingly accepting. "Come in. Let's see what you have to say." Daniela stepped into the mansion, feeling small and out of place amid the extravagant wealth and luxury that surrounded her. The grand hallways, lined with priceless art and opulent furnishings, seemed to mock her with every step she took. Arturo led her to a lavishly appointed living room, its elegance only heightening her sense of unease. He gestured for her to sit, his eyes still filled with doubt. "Sit down," Arturo ordered, his tone leaving no room for refusal. "Now tell me everything, how you found these documents, and why you're here." And so, in that room filled with wealth beyond her wildest dreams, Daniela prepared to tell her story, hoping that this moment would be the beginning of a new chapter in her life, one where her strength and resolve could finally bring her the peace and security she had been longing for. Daniela inhaled deeply, gathering her thoughts, fully aware that this moment was pivotal. She needed to be transparent, honest, and convincing. "I found these documents in a pile of trash while walking down the street," she began, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. "When I saw your name and address, I knew they were important, so I decided to bring them to you personally. I thought it was the right thing to do." Arturo remained silent, his face a mask of contemplation as he processed her words. Skepticism still clouded his eyes, but there was something in Daniela's demeanor and the raw honesty reflected in her gaze that began to chip away at his doubt. He was well aware of how crucial those documents were, and the earnestness in her voice forced him to reconsider his initial suspicion. "Very well," he said at last, though his tone was still guarded. "I will verify these documents, but you must understand I can't simply trust a stranger who shows up out of nowhere. I will have to look into this." Daniela nodded, fully aware of the gravity of the situation. "I understand," she replied, her voice laced with gratitude. "I just wanted to do the right thing." Arturo watched her for a long moment, his stern expression softening, if only slightly. "Let's see," he said, still skeptical but now more open to the possibility that she was telling the truth. He began to carefully examine the documents, his eyes narrowing as he flipped through them. Relief washed over his features, mingling with surprise as he realized the significance of what he held in his hands. These documents were indeed vital, just as Daniela had said, and the thought of losing them had filled him with a cold dread. After what felt like an eternity, Arturo stood up, his eyes meeting Daniela's as she sat, waiting with bated breath. "These documents are mine," he confirmed, his voice softer but still formal. "You did well bringing them here." A wave of relief washed over Daniela, her eyes shimmering with a mix of emotions: relief, anxiety, and a glimmer of hope. "I knew they were important," she said quietly, her voice steady but her heart racing. Arturo set the documents aside and walked over to a nearby table. He picked up his wallet and began writing out a check, his pen gliding across the paper. "How much do you want for finding and returning these?" he asked, not lifting his gaze from the checkbook. Daniela's heart sank as she shook her head vigorously. "I don't want money," she insisted, her voice firm yet soft. "That's not why I did this." Arturo paused, his pen hovering above the checkbook as he looked up, confusion etched on his face. "Then what do you want?" he asked, genuine curiosity replacing his earlier suspicion. Daniela sighed deeply, bracing herself for what she knew would be an unusual and risky request. "I want you to treat me like a daughter for a week," she said, her voice unwavering yet laced with a vulnerability she couldn't hide. Arturo froze, her words hanging in the air like an unexpected gust of wind. He slowly lowered his pen and turned to face her fully, his eyes wide with astonishment. "What?" he asked, disbelief coloring his voice. "I've never known what it's like to have a real family," Daniela explained, her tone sincere and tinged with desperation. "I want to experience what it's like to have a father, even if it's just for a short while." Arturo exhaled slowly, struggling to comprehend the request. He had expected her to demand money, something tangible and material, but this was beyond anything he could have imagined. There was a vulnerability in her plea that touched something deep within him, something he hadn't felt in years. The memory of his father, lost to him when he was just a boy, flashed through his mind. He understood, perhaps better than anyone, the profound impact a father's absence could have on a life. "You're asking me to treat you like a daughter for a week," he repeated, his voice filled with disbelief, but also with a hint of something else: empathy. "Yes," Daniela affirmed, her eyes never leaving his. "That's all I want. No money, no material things. I just want to know what it feels like to have a father, even if it's only for a little while." Arturo stared at her, the enormity of her request sinking in. It was a simple plea, yet one laden with so much unspoken pain and longing. He realized that what she was asking for wasn't just a fleeting experience, it was a glimpse of the love and security she had been denied her entire life. Since his father's passing, the idea of having children had always seemed distant, almost irrelevant, but now, this young woman stood before him, asking not for money or material possessions, but for something far more profound: a fleeting taste of belonging. "All right," Arturo finally said, his voice steady but laced with a newfound softness. "I accept your request. For the next week, I will treat you as my daughter." A rush of emotion overwhelmed Daniela, her eyes welling up with tears she hadn't expected. Relief, gratitude, and fragile hope all mingled within her, creating a swell of feelings she could barely contain. "Thank you, Mr. Arturo," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "This means more to me than you can imagine." "Just Arturo is fine," he corrected, offering her a slight, almost fatherly smile. "Let's start tomorrow. You'll stay here in the mansion for the week. I'll have a room prepared for you." "Thank you, Arturo," Daniela responded, a genuine smile breaking across her face for the first time since she had arrived. Arturo rose from his seat and rang the bell. Within moments, the housekeeper appeared, her stern demeanor now tinged with curiosity. "Prepare a room for Daniela," Arturo instructed, his tone firm but gentle. "She'll be staying with us for the week." The housekeeper arched an eyebrow, clearly taken aback by the unusual command, but she said nothing and simply nodded. Daniela followed her down the mansion's grand hallway, her heart fluttering with a mix of relief, nervousness, and a growing sense of anticipation. As they disappeared into the depths of the house, Arturo remained standing, still pondering the significance of what he had just agreed to. A short while later, the front door opened, and Arturo's wife, Lorena, stepped into the mansion, her arms laden with shopping bags. Her face was lit up with the satisfaction that always followed a successful shopping spree. Lorena was a woman who relished the comforts and luxuries of her life, and her afternoons spent shopping were a ritual she deeply cherished. But as she entered the lavishly decorated living room, she noticed Arturo sitting on the sofa, his expression unusually serious. The sight of her normally composed husband looking so pensive caused a flicker of concern to rise within her. "Arturo, what's going on?" Lorena asked, setting down her bags and approaching him. There was a slight tremor in her voice, a sign of the unease beginning to creep into her thoughts. Arturo looked up at her, taking a deep, steadying breath before speaking. "We need to talk, Lorena. Something unexpected happened today." Lorena felt a chill run down her spine, the seriousness in his tone unsettling her further. She sat down beside him, her gaze fixed on his face, searching for clues to the source of his unease. "What is it?" she asked, her voice betraying her apprehension. "A young woman named Daniela came to the house today," Arturo began, watching her reaction closely. "She found some important documents that I had lost, but instead of asking for money, she made a rather unusual request." Lorena's eyes narrowed, her concern quickly morphing into suspicion. "What kind of request?" she asked, her tone edged with distrust. "She asked to be treated as our daughter for a week," Arturo said, his voice calm but deliberate as he delivered the news. Lorena's eyes widened in shock, her discomfort immediately apparent. "What? And you agreed to that?" she exclaimed, unable to hide her disbelief. "Yes, I did," Arturo replied, his tone firm but understanding. "I know it's not something we're used to, but there's something about her that I can't ignore. She's had a difficult life, and I believe this is something we can do for her." Lorena shook her head, struggling to process what she was hearing. "And where is she now?" she asked, still not entirely convinced. "In the guest room," Arturo responded. "She'll be staying with us this week. Please, Lorena, try to understand. I believe this is the right thing to do." Lorena sighed, her mind racing as she tried to reconcile this sudden change with the life she knew. "I don't like this, Arturo, but if you believe it's right, I'll try," she said reluctantly, still unable to fully embrace the idea. Later that evening, as the family gathered for dinner, Daniela descended the grand staircase with a mixture of trepidation and determination. She found Arturo and Lorena already seated at the dining table, their contrasting expressions reflecting the different emotions they felt about the situation. Arturo offered her a warm smile, signaling for her to join them, while Lorena observed her with a gaze that was equal parts curiosity and suspicion. "Daniela, this is my wife," Lorena, Arturo introduced, his voice gentle but firm. "Nice to meet you, Mom," Daniela said quietly, trying her best to mask the nerves threatening to overwhelm her. "Likewise, Daniela," Lorena replied, though her tone was cool and guarded. "Arturo has told me about your request. I hope you understand that this is very unusual for us." "I do, Ma," Daniela responded with humility, "and I am incredibly grateful for the opportunity." Lorena's gaze softened slightly, though the doubt lingered in her eyes. "Tell us more about yourself, Daniela. How did you end up here?" Daniela took a deep breath, knowing that the truth of her life was not easy to tell, but also recognizing that honesty was her only option. "I grew up on the streets," she began, her voice steady but laced with sorrow. "I have no family. My mother died when I was very young, and I never knew my father. Since then, I've been on my own, doing whatever it took to survive." As Daniela spoke, Lorena watched her closely, trying to gauge the sincerity in her words. Arturo, on the other hand, felt his heart ache with empathy for the young woman sitting before them, her story resonating deeply with his own experiences of loss. "It must have been incredibly hard for you," Arturo said softly, his voice filled with a quiet understanding. "It was," Sir Daniela replied, meeting his gaze. "But I learned to be strong. Every day was a fight to stay alive. When I found your documents, I knew how important they were, and I wanted to do the right thing." The honesty in Daniela's eyes and the quiet strength in her voice slowly began to chip away at Lorena's initial distrust. She couldn't help but be moved by the depth of the young woman's story, even as she struggled to fully accept the situation. Meanwhile, Arturo's resolve only deepened, his determination to honor his commitment to Daniela growing stronger with each passing moment. Lorena's eyes narrowed slightly as she studied Daniela, still trying to grasp the full extent of her intentions. "And what do you hope to gain from this?" she asked, her voice tinged with curiosity and caution. Daniela took a deep breath, her vulnerability showing through despite her best efforts to remain composed. "I don't want money, Mom. I just want to know what it's like to have a family, even if it's only for a short while. I've never had that, and it's something I've always longed for," she explained, her voice soft but filled with a deep-seated yearning that tugged at Lorena's defenses. Arturo watched his wife closely, hoping she could see the sincerity in Daniela's words, the same sincerity that had moved him. Slowly, he noticed a subtle shift in Lorena's expression, a softening of the lines that had been etched in suspicion. "All right, Daniela," Lorena finally said, her tone less harsh, though still guarded. "This week will be a test for all of us. I hope we can all learn something from this experience." A small smile of gratitude spread across Daniela's face, her relief palpable. "Thank you, Ma. I promise to do my best not to disappoint you," she responded, her voice filled with determination and hope. As dinner continued, the conversation lightened, though the atmosphere around the table remained charged with the unspoken tension of their new and unusual situation. Daniela's presence brought a fresh dynamic to the household, one that was met with both curiosity and caution. The days at Arturo's mansion began with a sense of unease, but gradually shifted into something more comfortable, as Daniela adapted to her new surroundings. Arturo made a conscious effort to integrate her into the daily routine, introducing her to the staff and showing her around the expansive estate. Despite the opulence that surrounded her, Daniela felt a growing sense of ease, though Lorena's watchful gaze and the subtle judgments of others reminded her that she was still very much an outsider. On the first morning, Arturo decided that he and Daniela would have breakfast together. Lorena, visibly uncomfortable with the arrangement, sat down beside Arturo, her eyes critically observing every move Daniela made. "Daniela, do you have any idea what you'd like to do today?" Arturo asked, his voice gentle as he tried to ease the tension that hung in the air. "I'd like to learn more about your daily routine," Sir Daniela replied, her voice betraying her nervousness but also her resolve to make the most of this rare opportunity. "I want to understand what your day-to-day life is like." "Of course," Arturo responded with an encouraging smile. "I have some meetings at the office today, but you're welcome to join me. I want you to see what my work entails." Lorena rolled her eyes discreetly, clearly disapproving of the idea, but she remained silent, continuing her breakfast with an air of detachment as Arturo and Daniela conversed. After lunch, Arturo took Daniela to his home office, a place where he spent much of his time managing his business affairs. "This is my workspace," he explained, gesturing around the room. "Here, I handle the administration of my companies and conduct important meetings. Feel free to ask me anything." "Thank you, Arturo. I appreciate this. I've never been in an office like this before," Daniela said, her eyes wide with admiration as she took in the surroundings. Throughout the week, Arturo made a point to include Daniela in various family activities. They went on walks in the park, where they had the opportunity to talk more freely. During one of these walks, Arturo asked about Daniela's past, his curiosity and concern deepening with each day. "Daniela, tell me more about your life on the streets. How did you survive all this time?" he inquired, genuinely interested in her story. "It was tough," Arturo, Daniela admitted, her voice tinged with the pain of old memories. "Every day was a battle. I scavenged for food and did small jobs when I could. But the hardest part was the loneliness. I always wished I had someone I could trust, someone who cared." Arturo felt a deep pang of empathy for Daniela as she spoke. He could relate to the emptiness of growing up without a father, and he found himself drawn to her story, his protective instincts slowly awakening. They spent that afternoon sharing stories, laughing, and for the first time, Daniela began to experience a sense of family, something she had longed for all her life, but had never known. However, not everyone in the household was as quick to embrace Daniela's presence. Lorena, in particular, remained a constant source of silent disapproval. Her discomfort was only amplified when Arturo's relatives came to visit for a family dinner. The tension in the air was palpable as glances and whispers circulated the table, Daniela, acutely aware of the judgment being passed on her. "So Daniela, are you a friend of Arturo's?" one of Arturo's aunts asked, her tone laced with condescension. "She's with us for a week, helping with some personal matters," Arturo interjected quickly, attempting to steer the conversation away from uncomfortable territory. "I see," the aunt replied, her skepticism barely concealed. "And where are you from, dear?" Daniela took a breath, maintaining her composure despite the scrutiny. "I grew up on the streets, without a family," she explained calmly. "Arturo and Lorena have given me a chance to experience what it's like to have a home, even if it's only for a short time." The room fell silent, the weight of Daniela's words hanging in the air. Lorena's relatives exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to respond. But Arturo's protective instincts kicked in, and he quickly changed the subject, steering the conversation away from the scrutiny that had momentarily fixated on Daniela. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur, with polite conversation and forced smiles masking the underlying tension. Daniela couldn't help but feel the weight of the unspoken judgment around her, but she also felt a growing determination to prove herself, to show that she belonged, even if only for this brief moment in time. As the week progressed, the dynamics within Arturo's household continued to evolve, with some embracing the change more readily than others. And through it all, Daniela held onto the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, she had found the semblance of a family she had always yearned for. The whispers and judgmental glances persisted, but Daniela remained resolute. She knew this opportunity was rare and wouldn't allow the disapproval of others to undermine it. Arturo, sensing Daniela's discomfort, made an effort to include more activities that could bring them closer together. One afternoon, they decided to cook together in the mansion's spacious kitchen. "Do you enjoy cooking?" Daniela Arturo asked as he skillfully chopped vegetables. Daniela smiled, feeling a warmth she hadn't experienced in a long time. "I never really had the chance to cook much, but I've always found it fascinating. It's something I never imagined I'd be doing." Arturo chuckled, appreciating her enthusiasm. "Let's keep it simple but special. Cooking together is a great way to get to know each other better, and it's a small way for you to experience what a family routine is like." As the days flew by, the bond between Arturo and Daniela deepened. Arturo began to see her as more than just a lost young woman. He saw potential, determination, and a spirit that refused to be broken. For Daniela, the warmth and acceptance she found in Arturo's company were unlike anything she had ever known. However, Lorena viewed this growing connection with increasing unease. The week, which had begun with a glimmer of hope and a willingness to give Daniela a chance, was now becoming a source of tension within the mansion. From the moment Lorena and Daniela had first met, an underlying tension had lingered, growing more pronounced with each passing day. Lorena couldn't shake her discomfort with Daniela's presence and the way Arturo seemed to embrace her so openly. Suspicion festered in Lorena's mind, and her disapproval became harder to mask. The situation reached a boiling point one Thursday morning when Daniela entered the kitchen, hoping to prepare breakfast as Arturo had suggested, to make her feel more at home. "What are you doing here?" Lorena's voice cut through the air, sharp and cold. Daniela turned, startled but trying to maintain her composure. Arturo suggested that I could make breakfast today, she replied, her voice calm despite the tension. Of course he did, Lorena sneered, her words dripping with sarcasm. Do you think you're going to win everyone over with this act of yours? The accusation stung, but Daniela fought to stay composed. I'm not trying to win anyone over, Lorena. I just want to know what it's like to have a family, even if it's just for a short time, she explained, her voice steady but her heart pounding. Family. Lorena's eyes narrowed as she crossed her arms, stepping closer. Do you think you can just walk into our lives and become a part of it? Don't be so naive. Daniela swallowed hard, the pain of Lorena's words cutting deep. I know it's hard to understand, but I'm not here to manipulate anyone. I just want to feel what it's like to have a home, to belong somewhere, she insisted, feeling tears welling up despite her efforts to hold them back. Lorena scoffed, her disbelief palpable. I see right through you. You're using your sob story to gain Arturo's sympathy, and he's falling right into your trap, she accused, her voice low and venomous. That's not true. Daniela's voice rose in frustration. The first time she had allowed her emotions to surface so strongly. All I asked for was a chance to feel what it's like to have a father and a family. I don't want anything more than that. The tension was thick, almost suffocating, as Lorena leaned in, her face mere inches from Daniela's. I don't trust you, Daniela, and I'm going to make sure Arturo sees you for who you are, she whispered harshly before turning on her heel and leaving the kitchen. Daniela stood there, taking deep breaths to steady herself, the weight of Lorena's words heavy on her heart. She had known this experience would be challenging, but she hadn't expected it to hurt so much. The urge to give up tugged at her, but Arturo's promise to treat her like a daughter kept her rooted. She couldn't let Lorena destroy the one chance she had to experience something she had always dreamed of. Later that day, Arturo noticed something was wrong. Daniela was unusually quiet, her demeanor distant and withdrawn. Concerned, he found her sitting alone in the garden, gazing out at the horizon with a forlorn expression. Daniela, is everything all right? Arturo asked gently, sitting down beside her. Daniela looked at him, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. No, Arturo, it's not, she admitted, her voice trembling. Lorena doesn't believe me. She thinks I'm here to manipulate you. Arturo sighed, running a hand through his hair, clearly troubled. I knew this would be difficult for her, but I didn't expect it to escalate like this. I'll talk to Lorena. This can't continue, he promised, his tone resolute. Thank you, Arturo, but I don't want to cause any trouble between you two, Daniela said sadly, shaking her head. All I wanted was a small taste of what it feels like to have a family's love. Arturo placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Daniela, I understand, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you get that experience. We'll find a way to work this out, he assured her, his determination unwavering. That night, the tension around the dinner table was palpable. Lorena's cold glances were hard to miss, while Arturo did his best to maintain a peaceful atmosphere. But the strain was too much, and eventually, Arturo could no longer stay silent. Lorena, we need to talk about this. We can't go on like this, Arturo said firmly, his voice cutting through the uneasy silence. Talk about what, Arturo? About how this girl is manipulating you, Lorena snapped, her frustration boiling over as she crossed her arms defensively. Daniela is not here to manipulate us, Arturo replied, his voice calm but insistent. She's just trying to experience what it's like to have a family. Please, try to understand that. Understand? Lorena's voice was incredulous, her anger barely contained. You want me to understand that you've brought a stranger into our home and are treating her like a daughter? It's absurd. Lorena, I know this is hard for you, but we need to be more compassionate, Arturo urged, his eyes pleading with her to see reason. Daniela has no one. This is the first time she's ever had a chance to feel something like a home, like a family. Lorena stared at him, her emotions swirling between anger, confusion, and something she couldn't quite name. "You expect me to just accept this?" she asked, her voice quieter now, but no less intense. "You expect me to pretend like this isn't completely upending our lives?" "I'm not asking you to pretend," Lorena Arturo said softly, reaching out to take her hand. "I'm asking you to try to see this from Daniela's perspective, to try and offer her the kindness that she's never known." The room fell silent as Lorena looked down at their joined hands, her mind racing. This wasn't just about a stranger in their home, it was about the cracks in their relationship, the fears and insecurities that this situation had brought to the surface. Lorena closed her eyes for a moment, trying to find the strength to confront these feelings, to let go of her resentment, and to open herself up to the possibility of understanding. "I don't know if I can do that, Arturo," she whispered, her voice trembling with uncertainty. "But I'll try. For you, I'll try." Arturo squeezed her hand gently, a small smile of gratitude on his face. "That's all I'm asking, Lorena. Just give it a chance." Daniela, watching the exchange from across the table, felt a flicker of hope. The path ahead was still uncertain, fraught with challenges, but for the first time she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could find a place in this family after all. Lorena's face flushed with a mix of anger and fear as she faced Arturo and Daniela. Her eyes darted between them, searching for a way out of the corner she felt she had been pushed into. "This is ridiculous, Arturo," she repeated, but her voice wavered, betraying her inner turmoil. "You can't seriously believe I would do something like that." Arturo stepped closer, his expression softened by a blend of concern and disappointment. "Lorena, I'm not accusing you of anything. I just want to understand what happened. If there's a misunderstanding, we can clear it up, but I need you to be honest with me." Lorena's defenses began to crumble under Arturo's gentle yet firm approach. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she uncrossed her arms. "I was there, Arturo. I did throw something away that night," she admitted quietly, her eyes downcast. Daniela watched the exchange with a mixture of apprehension and empathy. She hadn't wanted to cause more tension between Arturo and Lorena, but the weight of the truth pressed down on all of them. Arturo's heart sank as he processed Lorena's admission. "Why, Lorena? What were you throwing away?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lorena hesitated, the words sticking in her throat. "I found the documents," she finally confessed, her voice cracking under the strain. "I didn't know what they were at first, but when I realized they were yours, I panicked. I thought if you knew I had found them, you would think I was trying to sabotage you or that I had taken them in the first place." Arturo stared at her, the pieces of the puzzle slowly coming together. "So you threw them away instead of bringing them to me?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Tears welled up in Lorena's eyes, and she nodded, her shame now fully visible. "I was scared, Arturo. I didn't know what to do. And then when Daniela showed up with the documents, I felt trapped. I thought she was trying to use the situation to get close to you, and I resented her for it." The tension in the room was palpable as the truth hung in the air, raw and exposed. Arturo took a deep breath, trying to process everything. He felt a mix of anger, sadness, and confusion. "Lorena, I wish you had just told me the truth from the beginning," he said softly, the disappointment clear in his voice. Lorena looked at him, her eyes pleading for forgiveness. "I'm sorry, Arturo. I never meant for it to get this far. I just didn't want to lose you." Arturo's expression softened as he saw the genuine regret in Lorena's eyes. He stepped closer to her, taking her hands in his. "Lorena, you're not going to lose me. But we have to trust each other. We can't let fear and misunderstandings drive a wedge between us." Lorena nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I know. I'm so sorry for everything." Arturo pulled her into a gentle embrace, and for a moment, The tension in the room eased as they held each other, both feeling the weight of their emotions. After a few moments, Arturo pulled back slightly and looked over at Daniela, who had been silently observing the entire exchange. "Daniela, I'm sorry you had to be caught in the middle of this. You did the right thing by bringing the documents to me, and I'm grateful for your honesty." Daniela nodded, her voice thick with emotion. "I just wanted to help, Arturo. I never wanted to cause any problems between you and Lorena." Lorena wiped her tears and looked at Daniela, her expression no longer one of distrust, but of remorse. "I misjudged you, Daniela. I let my fears and insecurities cloud my judgment. I'm sorry for the way I treated you." Daniela offered a small, tentative smile. "I understand, Lorena. This situation has been difficult for all of us." Arturo looked between the two women, feeling a sense of relief that the truth had finally come out, even though it had been a painful process. "Let's take this as a chance to move forward," he said, his tone hopeful. "We've all made mistakes, but we can learn from them and grow stronger together." The night ended with a sense of tentative peace in the mansion. Though the wounds were still fresh, the air was lighter, and there was a shared understanding that they could work through this, even if it took time. For the first time since Daniela had arrived, she felt like she might truly belong, not just in the mansion, but in the hearts of the people who lived there. "Aiden, look at me," Jasper said softly, waiting until the boy's tear-filled green eyes met his. "I promise you, we'll figure out what happened. But for now, you're safe here. No one will hurt you or send you away, okay?" Aiden sniffled, wiping away his tears with the back of his hand. "Okay," he whispered, his voice fragile but full of trust. They finished their meal in silence, with Jasper occasionally glancing at Aiden, worry etched on his face. When the plates were cleared, Jasper led the boy back to the guest room. "Try to get some rest," he said gently, tucking the blankets around Aiden's small frame. "Tomorrow we'll start sorting all this out, I promise." Aiden nodded sleepily, his eyes already drooping with exhaustion. Jasper lingered for a moment, watching the boy as he drifted off to sleep, his expression finally peaceful. Quietly, Jasper left the room, closing the door softly behind him. Back in the living room, the weight of the evening pressed down on Jasper as he picked up his phone and dialed Dominic's number. After a few rings, Dominic's anxious voice came through the line. "Jasper, any news?" Jasper took a deep breath, bracing himself. "Dominic, I found him. I found Aiden." There was a stunned silence on the other end, followed by a choked sob. Are you Are you sure? Is he okay? Where is he?" "He's here with me, Dominic. He's safe." But Jasper hesitated, not wanting to alarm his friend, but knowing he had to be honest. "There's something wrong. Aiden believes you abandoned him. He thinks you sent him away." What Dominic's voice was a mixture of shock and raw pain. "Jasper, I would never do that. I love my son more than anything." "I believe you," Jasper quickly reassured him. "But something happened that made Aiden think you didn't want him." There was a long pause, the silence thick with guilt and regret. When Dominic finally spoke, his voice was heavy, laden with the weight of untold truths. "Jasper, there's something you need to know, something I should have told you before." Jasper's stomach tightened with dread. "What is it, Dom?" "It's about Aiden's mother," Dominic began, his voice cracking under the strain of the memories, "and about what happened the night Aiden disappeared." As Dominic's words spilled out, Jasper felt as if he were being pulled into deep, turbulent waters, the truth far more complex and harrowing than he had ever imagined. But as he glanced toward the room where Aiden slept, he knew there was no turning back. He was committed now, bound by a promise and a newfound sense of purpose, no matter what lay ahead. The night stretched on, full of revelations and the uncertainty of tomorrow. But for the first time in years, Jasper felt that he was exactly where he was meant to be, ready to face whatever fate had in store. The next morning, Jasper awoke with a stiff back, the result of spending the night on the sofa. The conversation with Dominic from the night before echoed in his mind, each revelation heavy with the burden of what was to come. He moved quietly to the guest room and carefully opened the door. Aiden was still curled up in the blankets, his face serene in sleep, a stark contrast to the tension and fear he had shown the previous night. Jasper stood there for a moment, his thoughts swirling with the weight of everything Dominic had revealed. Aiden's mother, Sarah, was not the woman everyone believed her to be. Dominic had explained that she suffered from untreated bipolar disorder, her mood swinging wildly between euphoric highs and crushing lows. The night Aiden disappeared, she had been caught in the grip of a manic episode. Jasper closed his eyes, recalling Dominic's anguished confession. "I only stepped out for half an hour, Jasper, just to get her medicine. When I came back, they were both gone." A soft rustling from the bed brought Jasper back to the present. Aiden was waking up, his green eyes blinking sleepily in the morning light. "Good morning," Jasper said softly, stepping into the room. "How did you sleep?" Aiden sat up, rubbing his eyes with a small fist. "Fine," he mumbled. "Better than ... well, better than in a long time." Jasper's heart clenched at the boy's words. "I'm glad to hear that. How about some breakfast? We can talk afterward if you're up for it." Aiden nodded hesitantly, and Jasper left him to get dressed. In the kitchen, as he prepared pancakes and fresh orange juice, Jasper's mind raced, trying to figure out how to discuss Dominic and Sarah with Aiden without overwhelming him. When Aiden appeared in the kitchen, wearing the same oversized clothes from the night before, Jasper couldn't help but notice how vulnerable and out of place the boy looked. "Come, sit down," Jasper smiled, placing a plate of pancakes in front of Aiden. "Eat as much as you want." They ate in silence, the clinking of forks against plates the only sound. Jasper watched as Aiden devoured the pancakes, his hunger a stark reminder of the life he had been leading. Jasper's chest tightened with each bite the boy took, thinking of all the days Aiden must have gone hungry. Aiden, Jasper began gently once the plates were cleared away. "I spoke to your father last night." Aiden froze, his eyes wide with apprehension. Did you ... Did you tell him where I am?" "No, I didn't," Jasper assured him quickly. "I just told him you were safe." "But Aiden, there are some things we need to talk about what happened the night you disappeared." Aiden's gaze dropped to the table, his hands balling into tight fists. "I don't want to talk about it." Jasper took a deep breath, steeling himself. "I know it's hard, Aiden, but it's important. Your father told me about your mother, about her illness." Aiden's eyes filled with tears, and he looked up, his voice trembling. She ... She said Dad didn't want us anymore, that we had to run away." Jasper's heart shattered at the raw pain in Aiden's voice. "Oh, Aiden," he said softly, fighting the urge to pull the boy into a comforting embrace. "Your mother was ill. She wasn't thinking clearly." But she seemed so sure. Aiden sobbed, tears now flowing freely down his cheeks. "She said Dad was going to send us away, that he didn't love me." Jasper moved slowly to Aiden's side, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Aiden, your father loves you more than anything in this world. He never wanted you to leave. He's been looking for you all these years." Aiden looked up at Jasper, his tear-filled eyes searching for reassurance, for truth. "Really?" "Really," Jasper confirmed, his voice steady and full of conviction. "Your father never gave up on you, Aiden. He's been trying to find you ever since that night. He loves you so much, and he wants nothing more than to see you again." Aiden sat there, absorbing Jasper's words, his heart torn between the pain of the past and the fragile hope of a future where he could be loved and wanted. Finally, he nodded, wiping the last of his tears away. "Okay," he whispered, his voice filled with a tentative belief that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. Jasper smiled, feeling a surge of relief and determination. "We'll take it one step at a time," he said softly. "But I promise you, Aiden, you're not alone anymore. We'll figure this out together." As they sat in the kitchen, the morning sun filtering through the windows, Jasper felt a deep sense of purpose settles over him. The road ahead would be difficult, full of challenges and unresolved pain, but he was committed to helping Aiden find the peace and love he deserved. And in doing so, Jasper knew he would find his path to redemption as well. Lorena's outburst echoed through the mansion as she stood, seething with anger. "I already told you, I didn't do anything," she shouted, her voice filled with frustration and fear. Arturo, who had been trying to keep his emotions in check, took a deep breath and looked at her with a mixture of disappointment and determination. "Lorena, I'm going to find out the truth, whether you help me or not. I just hope you're being honest with me," he said firmly before turning and leaving the room. Lorena remained standing, her chest heaving as she tried to control her breathing. Daniela, who had witnessed the exchange, stood quietly, her presence unwelcome to Lorena. Lorena's eyes narrowed as she turned her gaze to Daniela. "Stay out of this, Daniela. This isn't your business. You're not even family, you're just an intruder who only brings trouble," she spat, her voice dripping with contempt. Daniela, though shaken, held her ground. "I'm not trying to cause problems, Lorena. I just wanted a chance to know what it feels like to have a family, even if it's only for a little while," she said, striving to remain calm in the face of Lorena's hostility. Lorena moved closer, her expression fierce and accusatory. "Family? You think you can just waltz in here and steal my husband?" she accused, her voice rising with anger. Before Daniela could respond, Arturo re-entered the room, stunned by what he had just heard. "Lorena, that's absurd. Daniela isn't trying to take anything from you or anyone else. She just wants to experience what it's like to have a family," he said, his voice firm, attempting to put an end to the heated argument. "Oh, sure. And I'm supposed to believe that? A beggar shows up out of nowhere with a sob story, and you just eat it up," Lorena shouted, pointing a trembling finger at Daniela, her face flushed with fury. Arturo, struggling to maintain his composure, raised his hands in a calming gesture. "Enough, Lorena. This discussion ends here. It's late, and we all need to rest. Tomorrow, we'll talk more calmly," he declared, signaling for everyone to leave the room. Daniela, feeling humiliated and hurt, quietly retreated to the room that had been assigned to her, her mind racing with the events of the evening. As she climbed the stairs, she could still hear Lorena muttering insults under her breath. Arturo watched them both, his unease growing. Something about Lorena's reaction didn't sit right with him. Her nervousness, her anger, it all seemed too extreme. That night, Arturo lay in bed, his eyes fixed on the ceiling, his mind churning with questions. The image of Leandro, Daniela's friend, and the information he had shared kept replaying in his thoughts. Could Lorena be involved in something so underhanded? And if so, why? By the time the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, Arturo had made up his mind. "Tomorrow, I'll hire a detective. I need to get to the bottom of this," he resolved silently, his determination solidifying with each passing minute. The next morning, a heavy atmosphere hung over the mansion. Arturo descended the stairs with a clear purpose, ready to uncover the truth. He quickly called for Javier, his trusted assistant, and arranged a private meeting. "Javier, I need you to find a reliable detective, someone discreet and very efficient," Arturo instructed in a low, serious tone. Javier, sensing the gravity of the situation, nodded. "Of course, sir." Is there a specific issue I should know about? Arturo shook his head slightly. I'd prefer not to go into details right now. Just make sure this is handled quickly and quietly, he replied, effectively ending the conversation. As Javier left to carry out the task, Arturo felt a heavy weight settle on his shoulders. The mansion, once a symbol of comfort and success, now felt like a place of secrets and lies. He knew that whatever the detective uncovered could change everything, but he needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Lorena entered Arturo's office, trying her best to mask the anxiety that churned inside her. She could sense that Arturo's trust in her was eroding, but she wasn't prepared for what he had in store. Attempting to sound nonchalant, she asked, "What do you want to talk about?" Arturo, his face set with a stern resolve, placed a folder on the table between them. "I want to talk about this," he said, flipping the folder open to reveal the damning evidence inside. As Lorena's eyes fell on the photos, her complexion drained of color. The carefully constructed facade of confidence she had maintained for so long shattered in an instant. "This isn't what it looks like," she stammered, scrambling for a way to explain. Arturo's gaze bore into her, unyielding. "Then explain it, Lorena," he demanded, his voice laced with disappointment. "Because what I see here is my wife throwing away important documents that Daniela found and returned to me." Lorena's mind raced, searching desperately for a believable excuse, but nothing came. The truth was now cornering her, leaving her with no escape. Arturo's patience was wearing thin. "I want the truth," he pressed, his eyes locked on hers. "Why did you throw away my documents?" The pressure mounted, and Lorena could feel the walls closing in on her. Finally, she broke, her carefully maintained composure crumbling as she revealed her true intentions. "I did it because I wanted to hurt you, Arturo," she admitted, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. "I thought if you lost those documents, your life would spiral into chaos, and then I could get to the fortune more easily." Arturo stood silent, the weight of her words settling heavily on him. He closed his eyes, struggling to keep his emotions in check as the enormity of her betrayal washed over him. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, thick with hurt. "How could you do this, Lorena?" Lorena, realizing the gravity of her actions, tried to justify herself. "I was desperate, Arturo. I felt trapped in this marriage, and I thought this was the only way out." Arturo shook his head, the disappointment in his eyes deepening. "So you decided to destroy me instead," he said, his tone filled with quiet rage. "That is unacceptable, Lorena." He stood up, pacing the room as he tried to process what had just been revealed. Lorena, sensing that she was losing him, attempted to move closer, her hands reaching out as if to mend the growing rift between them. But Arturo raised his hand, stopping her in her tracks. "Don't come any closer," he warned, his voice cold and final. "You've destroyed the trust that was the foundation of our family. I can't continue living like this." Panic set in for Lorena as she realized the full extent of what was happening. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice quivering with fear. Arturo turned to face her, his decision already made. "I'm going to ask for a divorce," he declared, the words leaving no room for negotiation. "No, Arturo, please," Lorena pleaded, tears now streaming down her face. "Don't do this. We can work this out." But Arturo was resolute. "There's nothing left to work out, Lorena. You've unforgivably betrayed my trust. Our marriage is over," he stated, his gaze unwavering, signaling that there was no turning back. The fallout was immediate. The news of their impending divorce spread quickly, sending shockwaves through their family and close friends. Lorena, now isolated and desperate, tried in vain to explain her actions to those around her, but her justifications fell on deaf ears, her excuses sounding hollow and insincere. Arturo, meanwhile, began the process of dismantling the life they had built together, determined to move forward without the woman who had so deeply betrayed him. In the end, the once seemingly unshakable foundation of their marriage crumbled, leaving both Arturo and Lorena to grapple with the consequences of the choices they had made. Upstairs, Lorena was in a fury, hastily packing her belongings while casting venomous glares at anyone unfortunate enough to cross her path. Her mind raced with thoughts of betrayal, anger, and regret. She felt cornered, lashing out at those around her, searching for someone to blame for the unraveling of her carefully constructed life. Downstairs in the kitchen, Daniela could hear the muffled shouts and hurried footsteps from above. The mansion, once a place of opulence and comfort, now felt suffocating, charged with a dark energy that seeped into every corner. She busied herself with cleaning, trying to drown out the sounds of turmoil, but it was impossible to ignore the sense of impending doom. Arturo, still locked in his office, braced himself for the inevitable showdown. He knew Lorena wouldn't leave without one last attempt to stir chaos, to leave her mark on what was left of their fractured lives. Suddenly, the door to the office swung open, and Lorena stormed in, her face a twisted mask of anger and pain. But before confronting Arturo, she diverted her attention to the kitchen, where she spotted Daniela. Her steps quickened, and for a brief moment, it seemed like she might collapse under the weight of her own emotions. But instead, she hardened, her eyes blazing with fury as she approached Daniela. "You got what you wanted, didn't you?" Lorena spat, her voice dripping with venom. "Always playing the poor, helpless orphan, but I see right through you, Daniela." Daniela turned slowly, her heart pounding in her chest as she faced Lorena's wrath. She knew that anything she said could escalate the situation further, so she remained calm, her voice measured. "I didn't want to cause any problems, Lorena. I just wanted to help," she said quietly. Lorena let out a harsh, bitter laugh, her eyes narrowing. "Help? You came here with a plan, didn't you? You fooled everyone, especially Arturo, but you won't fool me." Before Daniela could respond, Arturo appeared in the doorway, his presence instantly commanding the room. He looked at Lorena with a mixture of sadness and resolve, his voice calm but firm. "That's enough, Lorena. Daniela isn't responsible for any of this. She simply exposed the truth you tried so hard to bury." Lorena turned to Arturo, her expression flickering between anger and something more vulnerable, almost pleading before hardening once again. The truth is, you've let this girl interfere in our lives and destroy our marriage," she accused, her voice thick with bitterness. Arturo sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair, a gesture of exhaustion and frustration. "Our marriage was already in ruins, Lorena. You threw away our vows the moment you decided to discard those documents. Don't blame Daniela for the consequences of your actions." He replied, his tone softened by sorrow but resolute. Lorena stood there, trembling with barely restrained rage, but something in Arturo's words, his unyielding firmness, stopped her from lashing out further. She knew there was no saving face, no turning back from what she had done. With a final glare of contempt aimed at Daniela, she grabbed her bags and headed for the door. "This isn't over, Arturo," she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "You'll regret treating me like this." Arturo looked at her, his eyes heavy with a sadness that seemed to weigh down his very soul. "I've regretted many things, Lorena, but protecting my family is not one of them," he said, his voice steady, though tinged with a deep, lingering sorrow. With those words, Lorena turned and walked out of the mansion, the door closing behind her with a finality that echoed through the silent halls. Arturo remained standing in the doorway, watching the space where she had just been, the reality of the situation settling over him like a suffocating blanket. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, filled with the echoes of the life he and Lorena had once shared, but there was no turning back now. He had made his choice, and it was one he would have to live with, for better or for worse. As the mansion gradually fell silent, Daniela stood in the kitchen, her hands trembling slightly as she processed what had just happened. The storm had passed, but its aftermath left her feeling both relieved and burdened. She knew that Arturo's life and her own would never be the same again. But perhaps, in the wreckage of what had been, they could find a way to build something new, something stronger. Only time will tell. As Lorena stormed out of the mansion, slamming the door behind her, the sound reverberated through the empty halls, leaving a profound silence in its wake. Daniela stood quietly, absorbing the gravity of the moment. The tension, the anger, and the sadness all seemed to dissipate with Lorena's departure, but the weight of the situation still hung heavily in the air. Arturo approached Daniela, his shoulders slumped, his expression weary yet sincere. "I'm so sorry you had to go through all of this, Daniela," he said, his voice filled with genuine regret. "None of this is your fault." Daniela shook her head, her emotions a tangled mix of relief and sadness. "I know, Arturo, but I'm sorry this happened to you too. This isn't what I wanted," she replied softly, her eyes reflecting the turmoil of the past few days. Arturo offered a sad smile, placing a comforting hand on Daniela's shoulder. "We'll get through this together," he reassured her, his voice steady despite the pain. A new family, built on truth and trust. As night fell, the mansion seemed to settle into an eerie quiet, the echoes of past conflicts fading into the background. Arturo and Daniela both understood that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but at that moment, they also felt a flicker of hope. Their shared honesty and courage had planted the seeds of a new beginning, a life where trust and genuine care could finally take root and grow. The next morning, Arturo was in the kitchen, brewing coffee, when Daniela walked in. He greeted her with a gentle smile, an attempt to bring some normalcy back to their lives after the storm of emotions they had weathered. "Good morning, Daniela. Did you sleep well?" he asked warmly, handing her a steaming cup of coffee. "Yes, Arturo, better than I have in a long time," Daniela replied, returning his smile. Arturo's eyes softened as he handed her the cup. "Please, just Arturo. We're all home now," he said, a hint of warmth in his voice. They sat together at the table, the silence between them comfortable, almost peaceful. After a moment, Arturo looked at Daniela, his expression thoughtful. He saw the strength and resilience that had carried her through so much adversity, and he couldn't help but admire her for it. "Daniela, I want to thank you for your honesty. You brought to light something I couldn't see, and for that I'm deeply grateful," he said, his tone sincere. Daniela felt a lump form in her throat as she listened. "I just wanted to help, Arturo. I never meant to cause any problems," she said, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. Arturo shook his head gently. "You didn't cause problems, Daniela. You revealed the truth, and that takes courage. For that, you have my respect," he said, offering her a sad but genuine smile. A wave of relief washed over Daniela, mixed with the lingering sadness of all that had transpired. Arturo continued, his voice filled with conviction. "Daniela, I know this week has been incredibly difficult for both of us, but I want you to know that I'm here for you. We'll get through this together." Daniela nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you, Arturo. Since the day I found those documents, my life has changed in ways I never imagined. I never thought I'd find someone who would help me like you have," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Arturo reached out and took Daniela's hand, a gesture that spoke volumes. "You deserve a chance at a better life, Daniela. And as long as I'm here, you'll have it. You're part of this family now," he said, his words carrying the weight of a promise. In the days that followed, Arturo made a point of including Daniela in all aspects of life at the mansion. They walked together in the garden, sharing stories and experiences, slowly but surely beginning to build the foundation of a new family. The shadows of the past still lingered, but in the warmth of their growing bond, There was a sense of healing, a belief that together they could face whatever the future held. One afternoon, as they strolled through the garden, Arturo paused and looked at Daniela with a newfound brightness in his eyes. "You know, Daniela, since you came into my life, I've realized just how much I was missing," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I got so caught up in the whirlwind of business that I forgot what matters." Daniela, curious and touched by his words, asked softly, "And what is it that matters, Arturo?" "Family, love, the things that money can't buy," Arturo replied with a warm smile. "You reminded me of that." Tears welled up in Daniela's eyes as she listened. She had never imagined she could mean so much to someone, especially someone like Arturo. "Thank you, Arturo," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I never had a real family, but now, for the first time, I feel like I've found a home." Arturo reached out and hugged Daniela tightly, and in that embrace, they both felt a sense of peace and belonging. They knew they were on the right path, healing the wounds of the past and building a new future together. As the days passed, Arturo began to think carefully about Daniela's future. He wanted to give her every opportunity she had been denied in the past. He hired private tutors to help her catch up on her education and encouraged her to think about her dreams and aspirations. One evening during dinner, Arturo broached the subject gently. "Daniela, I want you to start thinking about what you want to do, whether it's continuing your studies, pursuing a career, or anything else. I'll be here to support you," no matter what he said, his tone full of encouragement. Daniela smiled, feeling a surge of confidence she had never felt before. "I've always wanted to study, maybe even go to college," she admitted, a bit shyly. "But I never thought it was possible." "Then let's make it possible," Arturo replied without hesitation. "We'll work together to make sure you can achieve that dream." Arturo's unwavering support made Daniela feel valued in a way she never had before. She threw herself into her studies with newfound dedication, and Arturo was always there, offering guidance and encouragement. As time passed, their relationship grew stronger, deepening beyond the bonds of financial or material support into something much more meaningful, a genuine bond of affection and mutual respect. Arturo began to see in Daniela the daughter he had never had, while Daniela found in Arturo the father she had always longed for. One quiet evening, as they sat together on the balcony watching the sunset, Arturo reached over and took Daniela's hand. "Daniela," he began, his voice full of sincerity, "you brought light into my life at a time when I was lost in darkness. We've been through so much together, and I want you to know that you're my daughter now, and nothing can ever change that." Tears of happiness filled Daniela's eyes as she looked at Arturo, feeling completely loved and accepted. "Thank you, Arturo," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I feel the same way. You're the father I always wished for." From that moment on, Arturo's house became more than just a luxurious mansion. It became a true home, a place where love, trust, and mutual support flourished. Together, Arturo and Daniela faced the future with courage and hope, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would always have each other. In their hearts, they knew that this bond, forged through trials and triumphs, was the family they had both always longed for. And there you have it, a heartfelt journey of redemption, love, and the power of family. What did you learn from Arturo and Daniela's story? How will you bring the lessons of trust, courage, and unconditional support into your own life? We'd love to hear from you, so please comment below on one thing you've learned and plan to put into practice. If you enjoyed this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiring stories like this one. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.